I'm Martin Cordoba, a professional pastry chef. I'm currently working as a sous pastry chef at a luxury 5-star hotel. Today, I'll recreate the viral Alfajor from Habana, released for Mar del Plata's 150th anniversary. We'll start with the Alfajor caps, a unique dough used in classic Mar del Plata alfajores, containing orange zest, baking soda, and vanilla. We'll use a vanilla bean in this case, enhancing the flavor quality significantly. Okay, as we agreed, I'll start with the Alfajor caps. We'll begin with 10.58 ounces of room temperature butter. It's at room temperature, which makes it much more malleable and much easier to beat. We'll add 5.29 ounces of sugar. We will place the room temperature creamy butter in a bowl, as I said. Why is it in cream form? To create a creamy mixture. The cream mixture is a blend made of butter and sugar with the aim of dissolving the sugar very well, incorporating a bit of air, and ultimately whitening the butter. It's a common feature of short crust pastries. Short crust pastries are those that have a large amount of sugar and butter. What's its purpose? To create a dough that feels crumbly in the mouth? What does crumbly mean? It breaks up in the palate. It lacks a gluten structure and isn't a hard dough. One will constantly feel a buttery, crumbly sensation in the mouth. That gives elasticity. We're going to add the sugar and start beating. We have reached the concept of butter whitening. You'll see the color has altered in this case. Here we can see how the butter has become more whitened. The texture is quite malleable, the sugar is not separate, and the butter is not separate. And what characterizes it the most is the white color. Let's proceed to scenting our dough. We'll use the characteristic Marpatense Pajones. It has a subtle orange flavor. We're going to use a zester, which is this grater we have. It's widely used in the pastry world because it has a very good edge. And what's good in this case is that it stays contained within the grater. So we're going to make the work a bit more organized. Whenever we add any aroma or some zest and essence, it's good to do it after we've already creamed our butter with the sugar. We do this because if we do it at the beginning, not all the aromas will end up being released. And what will end up happening is that the butter will encapsulate each micro essence and it won't perfume everything as we wanted it to. Let's move on to the next one. In this case, we're going to use a vanilla bean. Crucially, the taste of a bean can never be compared with vanilla essence. The flavor of this vanilla essence differs from what we're used to. It's more intense and delicious. I don't think Havana is using the vanilla bean because it's quite expensive and hard to get. I think they're more for a vanilla essence, but it's a license we're going to take today to be able to make an improved recreation of this Alfajor that everyone is going viral over. How are we going to manage to get the little seeds that are inside the vanilla bean or vanilla pod? By making a crosscut in which you will see that all the little seeds appear inside this pod, and what we are going to have is all these little seeds that are the ones that provide all that flavor. And we are going to pour it directly into the preparation, and we are going to resume with our mixer to be able to move on to the next step, which is to integrate the eggs. In pastry, we commonly break eggs one by one and add them. Why do we do this? It's because we might have a bad egg, a rotten one in poor condition, and if we already put it in the preparation, we are going to ruin everything we have done. And we can't know that until we crack the egg. What matters in egg cracking? Being able to distinguish that our egg white is clear, that will make it fresh, and the yolk that has not fallen apart. It must be firm, consistent, and with a classic yolk sheen, a yellow hue that leans towards orange. It's crucial to add one egg at a time, even though we only have one egg in this case. If there were more eggs, they should be added individually. Why? Because the preparation can be cut short. How does the preparation get cut short? When integrating the egg, it has yolk, so that yolk is going to mix with the other fat we had. It will end up destabilizing the whole recipe, and we are going to make the fat separate from the water. We're going to add the honey. The honey, in this case, like other sugars, more in the form of glucose, like glucose, honey, malt extract, are all extracts that are added in pastry preparations to provide silkiness. And most importantly, they provide moisture, which is what we are always looking for also in pastry pieces, that they are not dry pieces, always that they are unctuous, creamy, moist. We integrate the honey well. As I mentioned earlier, this is the creaming we use in short crust pastry for these alfajores. The presence of butter and honey is quite noticeable. We can see if all the little dots of the vanilla bean seeds can be seen. And this is like the previous part before adding the dry ingredients. Dry ingredients refer to all the components that are flour. In this case, we are going to use 4-0 flour. In pastry making, we always use 4-0, not 3-0, and not self-rising, because the one with the least amount of gluten is the 4-0. The others are the ones used for breading. Self-rising flour can be used organically, but it's preferable to differentiate it from 4-0 flour and add the leavening agents ourselves. In this case, we are going to have two leavening agents, which would be baking soda and baking powder. The action that each of these two has is baking soda. It's a leavening agent, that is a salt. And what it's going to do is tend to flatten the piece that we want. In this case, we want the alfajors to be flat. And on the other hand, we have the baking powder, which is going to add air to the preparation. We are going to add a tablespoon of baking powder, a tablespoon of baking soda. And finally, we are going to add the bitter cocoa. We make another parenthesis with the cocoa. It's important that it's not the afternoon hot chocolate. It's bitter cocoa that is used for pastry. And we are simply going to add 0.35 ounces. You know, we don't want it to contribute so much flavor. What we want it to contribute is color and a slight cocoa flavor, that it's not a chocolate alfajor. Because the Maritense alfajor is basically not a chocolate cookie. It's an alfajor dough that is slightly colored and has a slight cocoa flavor. Well, the last step in this dough is to add the dry ingredients. We are going to use a sieve. Why do we use a sieve? So that all those little balls that are formed from the dry ingredients don't end up in the final result once baked. There's nothing worse than finding a piece of pastry that when you bite into it, you find a little ball of baking powder or a little ball of baking soda. They taste unpleasant, as leavening agents are essentially salts. All right, once sifted, we're going to start slowly incorporating both mixtures, both the dry ingredients and the butter mixture we made. Once we have this fairly well incorporated, we're going to move it to the countertop and start a motion called fraisage. What's the meaning of fraisage? It's the technique of lightly pressing dough on the countertop using the part of your palm that produces the least heat. What's the goal here? We aim to avoid kneading to prevent gluten development. Remember that whenever we use these doughs, they should not have a lot of gluten. That's why we are not going to add extra flour in the dough or on the countertop. It simply has to finish coming together with the amounts that were weighed. For 10.58 ounces of butter, we had 150 of sugar and 400 of flour. That is, there is more amount of butter compared to the amount of flour we have. This way we guarantee a crumbly dough that melts in the mouth. We know the dough is ready when it begins to rise independently. I placed it there, and if I continue, the dough seems to rise on its own without any marks. That means it's ready to be chilled. So I have the dough ready. What we're going to do is chill it. It's important that this dough doesn't remain uncovered in the fridge. Why? Because it will start to dry out and it will be a bit messy when we bake it. You saw that I could easily lift it from the counter. That means it's no longer sticking because the amount of flour and butter we added is well hydrated. An important tip is that once we have this wrapped up, we flatten it a bit. This will greatly facilitate the final rolling out. Time in the fridge is about 4 or 5 hours. This dough has already been in the fridge resting. It cooled down well, as I was saying. The gluten is getting cushioned. It's binding well to the dough, which makes it elastic, not hard, and it will help me a lot to be able to roll it out. If we don't put the dough in the cold, what will happen is that when we stretch it out, it will become sticky and the pieces will deform in the oven. We're going to remove the film. This thing we did before, which was to flatten it a bit, will help us so that we don't have to exert so much force to roll it out. We put a very small amount of flour. We try to integrate as much as we can. It's a very crumbly dough, which, as you can see, will always tend to want to separate. We're not worried. With our hands, we give it a little heat. We're going to join it. We put flour on top, and we're going to start rolling it out. It's important that the force is exerted from the arms and as evenly as we can from both sides. Many times it will happen that one side presses more, so it will be thinner on one side and the other. A good alfajor is characterized by having an even top on all sides. We continue to incorporate a little bit of flour if necessary. The thickness we are looking for in the alfajor lid is about 4 or 0.19685 inches thick. That in the oven, remember that since we added the leavening agent, which was the baking powder and the baking soda, it will cause it to rise a bit. The lids will expand evenly a little bit. We are going to take it to an oven at 160 degrees. It can also be 180, that is a medium oven. I think that Habana in this alfajor used a dough that is the classic dough of their Mar del Plata alfajores that are filled with dulce de leche. And what they did was add 2 textures of dulce de leche, a pastry like dulce de leche on one hand and a mousse on the other. They use sea salt inside the dulce de leche filling, and on the outside it is covered by a classic semi-bitter chocolate coating. Using a 3.15 inches ring in this case. We are going to cut lids. Since it has a lot of butter, we won't need to flour or butter our plate because they won't stick. I really believe that this product that Havana launched is not just any product. It was a very good alfajor. They changed their tradition a bit. We changed this recipe by adding a vanilla pod for a unique flavor. Overall, it's a decent commercial alfajor. After cutting all our tops and stacking them on a baking sheet or plate, we'll refrigerate them for half an hour. This prevents deformation when they're baked. If left at room temperature, they might become oval or slightly deformed. This alfajor is characterized by having a double filling of dulce de leche. On one hand, we have a dulce de leche that is much more liquid, and one that is lighter, which is that kind of dulce de leche mousse that they decided to put in the preparation. We are going to place first to assemble the first filling, which is the one that is a kind of mousse. In my view, we have cream on one side, likely with condensed milk giving it elasticity and a sweet taste, along with white chocolate and pastry dulce de leche. We use pastry dulce de leche due to its solid consistency. In pastry, we use a lot of pastry dulce de leche because it's the one that holds up. It has more amount of fatty fork, more amount of sugars, which make it thicker. We're going to first put the cream. We're going to take it to the heat. It's important that we first only heat the cream and then add the condensed milk. Why does this happen? Because when we put the condensed milk on the heat, it's going to tend to burn very easily because it has a lot of sugar. Let's begin warming the cream. What we're doing is making this lighter colored dulce de leche cream that is quite sweet. And it's on this cream that we're going to place the sea salt. It's heated now. Time to add the condensed milk. After adding the condensed milk, we mustn't leave the fire unattended as it can burn. We're going to stir constantly to prevent the caramel from forming due to the condensed milk. If you can see, it tends to want to stick. That's because the condensed milk is trying to cling to the bottom of the pot due to the amount of sugar it has. But if we stir it, we avoid any inconvenience. We're going to remove it from the heat, and we're going to put 1.76 ounces of white chocolate, to which we're going to add 7 ounces of pastry, dulce de leche, and to this we're going to add 100 cubic centimeters of condensed milk and 50 cubic centimeters of cream. The heat will begin to melt the white chocolate and soften the typically solid pastry, dulce de leche. What we are doing is a cream. Creams are characterized by being unctuous, by not having much air presence. They are compact, they are quite soft on the palate. Unlike mousses, which have air incorporated, usually that air incorporation is given by a whipped egg whites. Mousses are usually much lighter creams, light, that in the palate you feel that presence of air bubbles, which characterizes mousses a lot. In this case, it is a cream, it is compact, which does not make it lose its unctuousness and creaminess in the palate. I tried this Havana Alfajor when I went to Mar del Plata in February. I wanted to see if it was real, that it was as delicious as everyone was saying. I purchased a genuine box of 8. I think I ate all 8 in 2 or 3 days. The addition of sea salt paired with dulce de leche and chocolate creates a perfect combination. So I was surprised that you can find those kinds of flavors in an industrialized product. We're going to take this filling to the refrigerator with the intention of making it much more consistent and easier to shape on the alfajor. We've already removed our alfajor tops from the oven. As you can see, they are still soft in the middle, but around all the edges, you can see that they have taken on a bit of color. And you're going to realize that they are cooked because the bottom is already ripe, so they are not going to deform or anything. It means that they are already cooked. We are going to let this cool to room temperature because if it is hot when we put the dulce de leche, it is going to start to disassemble everything. The idea is that this does not happen, so patience and wait for it to cool. I already have my alfajor tops that have reached room temperature. They are very rigid. We are going to be able to fill them. And in the middle, meanwhile, we are going to speed up the process by melting the chocolate that we are going to use for the bath. It's 7 ounces of chocolate. We're going to put it in a bain-marie. It's important that when we put a bain-marie, the water is at boiling point and the bowl does not touch the water. If it touches the water, it burns the chocolate. So simply let it melt with the steam it generates. We're going to use semi-sweet chocolate. It can be cup chocolate. It can also be coating chocolate. They claim their alfajor has 2 types of dulce de leche, but I believe there are 3. The dulce de leche outside the pastry is firmer and the one inside is creamy, which suggests it's not a pastry dulce de leche. Hence, I suggest we'll find the 3 dulce de leche. It's crucial to match the tops when doing this, known as matching the tops. As the tops are slightly uneven, aim to ensure their diameters are as similar as possible. Another important thing, which is sometimes a plus to seek a much neater result in the making of alfajores, is that instead of making the tops like this, let's say leaving the concave belly part upwards, what we are going to do is invert them. We are going to try to make the part that was touching the plate be the one that is on top and where the coating will go. So in this way, we achieve an alfajor that is very flat and very well defined at the edges. We We've placed the dulce de leche pastry in a piping bag to apply it on the circumference of the alfajor. The filling quantity should match the combined size of the two caps of the alfajor. If the caps are 1 centimeter, the filling should also be 1 centimeter. The filling, whether dulce de leche or chocolate ganache, can be piped with or without a tip. The crucial part is having a sufficiently large opening to ensure a thick enough roll of sweet or cream or ganache that can hold without exerting much force with the piping bag. It's important when we use the piping bag that the pressure is applied from the bottom at the tip, never from the top. Applying pressure from the top could exert excessive force, risking the nozzle we have to burst. So the pressure is always applied with the hand on the tip. Good, we have our filling that we made with the dulce de leche and condensed milk. We're going to take a generous portion. We're going to start flattening it, trying to make sure there's no empty space without this creaminess. We continue placing the colonial dulce de leche. Be generous. A sandwich cookie is good to feel the feeling it has that perfectly combines with the tops. And finally, we are going to add the flaked sea salt. This is kind of to each one's taste, but they have a great presence of sea salt inside the sandwich cookie. So without fear, we put it. It's crucial that it remains central. That way, it's located somewhere. It's not haphazardly placed, but like the core, the delight, the surprise. As mentioned, the flat part that touched the oven plate stays upward. We press without hesitation, ensuring the dulce de leche reaches the edges. To maintain tidiness, we'll use a spatula to smooth the edges. As I said, we press firmly. We use the spatula once it sticks out slightly from the edge, regardless of the alfajor type. On the other hand, we had the chocolate that we put to melt in a bain-marie. We always try to stir it occasionally with this. As I told you, it can burn because chocolate usually burns at a temperature of about 50 degrees. It can easily reach that temperature. Once we have it well melted and fluid, we remove it from the heat and we're going to add sunflower oil. Why is sunflower oil added? It's quite important when we make a pastry bath to prevent streaks from forming in the drying of that chocolate. So what we do with the addition of oil is to hydrolyze the chocolate. What do we achieve with this? Even though we are not tempering a chocolate because it would be too difficult and so on, we are making it into a pastry bath. For 7 ounces of chocolate, we are going to add 30 cubic centimeters of oil. We ensure it integrates well, forming a unified preparation. We are going to take each of our alfajores without fear. We are going to drop it on one side of the bath with the help of a spatula or a stopper. And now, yes, with a spatula, we are going to try to remove it from the bath. What do we do once it comes out? We give it a few taps, looking for all the excess chocolate to fall off, and we also start to sweep what is the base. Once we have it, we can support it. An advice I always give is once it is supported there, we move it from where we supported it. Why do we do this? To stop this chocolate relief here from sticking excessively to the bottom, preventing a thick and messy outcome. We can let this cool at room temperature, or if we are a bit anxious, we can take it to the fridge to speed up the cooling process. The alfajor is finished, the chocolate has cooled down, it's super solid. Let's see if the result is what we expected from this reversal of this alfajor that Havana made. As I mentioned, the coating became very rigid, not marbled, because we added oil to hydrolyze it. We have the 3 layers of dulce de leche, the pastry dulce de leche, we have the cream that we made from dulce de leche with condensed milk, and the colonial dulce de leche that has the little flakes of sea salt at the end. I think the result is quite well achieved. It's quite similar to the one I tried a little while ago in Mar del Plata. I think the dough has a bit more crunchiness, which I like how it feels on the palate. You can notice the lump of dough all together with the alfajor. There's a crunchiness that's quite tasty and cool. You can taste the orange zest, which we had said was going to contribute that characteristic flavor of the Mar del Plata alfajores. And the vanilla bean gives that plus in the quality of the product. What we always sought with the vanilla bean and the little seeds we added is to achieve that product that feels a bit more natural, that doesn't have something artificial, that modifies the flavor a bit, which is what we were looking for.